An important piece to understanding educational disparities is understanding how racism of the past has led to a legacy of housing discrimination. One reason there are educational gaps between minority races and whites is because minorities are more likely to inhabit poor urban areas, while whites are more likely to be placed in affluent suburban neighborhoods. Where you live affects your education because property taxes are a main way public schools are funded. The main question is, how did minorities, particularly African Americans, end up being marginalized to poor urban areas? I will show that housing discrimination still exists today, and racism of the past has allowed the marginalization of African Americans to continue. Housing discrimination has always existed in some sense due to segregation, but there was a period noted as the Golden Era, where integration would have allowed whites and blacks both to live in affluent suburban neighborhoods. This era begins with soldiers returning from World War II. Thousands of soldiers returned to America in 1945, all of which were looking for places to live. The Levitt family took advantage of this and began constructing not only homes, but a desirable community for the veterans of the war. Because of the monopoly the Levitt brothers constructed, they were able to sell these houses with full appliances at lower costs that were affordable for the returning war veterans. At this time, the veterans were also receiving GI Bills, which would supply them with money to purchase houses, as well as securing the option for their children to one day have higher education opportunities. Unfortunately, out of the billions of dollars given to returning soldiers, only 2% was given to blacks, as David Kushner writes in his novel titled Levittown. Blacks were supplied with lower amounts of money or no money at all from the GI Bill, even though they were veterans just as much as white men were. On top of this, there was a stigma of having blacks move into white neighborhoods. Real estate agents created a system labeled blockbusting. The real estate agents would convince white homeowners to sell their houses below value by telling them minorities would be moving into their neighborhood. The agents would then sell the houses at prices over value to black families who were desperate to escape the overcrowded ghettos. This caused the majority of the white population to believe that having minorities in their neighborhoods would lead to the destruction of their homes and decrease the values of their homes. The Levitt brothers followed this by making Levittown a white-only community. Here is a clip from the documentary The House We Live In, which will tell the personal story of Eugene Burnett, who wished to purchase a home in Levittown, Pennsylvania.
We came to Levittown and we found the model house, and we walked in and we looked around, and of course, in the eyes of a young man who was raised in the ghetto, so to speak, it was an interesting experience, interesting lifestyle, seeing all the new modern conveniences, very fascinating.
Eugene Burnett came home with almost 1 million other black GIs. They had fought for the country in segregated ranks. They returned hoping for equality and the American dream. For many, that dream was a new home for little money down and some of the easiest credit terms in history.
I went up to the salesman. We're interested in your home. We're interested in buying one. And what is the procedure? Is there an application to be filled out? So forth. So he looked at me, looked around, and he said to me, he says, "Listen, it's not me, but the owners of this development have not as yet decided to sell these homes to Negroes."
It was not only the Levitt brothers that adopted these racist policies, but even the Federal Housing Administration. The American government decided that having minorities close to a home altered the value of the home just as much as the condition of the house would. The Federal Housing Administration created a system called redlining, which encouraged whites to be separate from blacks. Neighborhoods that were white-only received the best rating from the FHA and thus received the best mortgages. Integrated neighborhoods received a lower rating, and then the lowest rating, which was red, was given to majority minority neighborhoods, which labeled them a financial risk, thus receiving no mortgages at all. This process was allowed until 1968. This is all significant to the current times because this gives whites an extreme advantage. As the saying goes, poor beget poor beget poor. Whites were able to purchase homes for affordable prices in the late 1940s, so their children were able to inherit their wealth. Black families did not have the opportunity to purchase nice homes or receive mortgages, so they could not pass anything on to their children, making it a challenge to move up in wealth. Housing discrimination even exists today, and professional Marge Turner will elaborate on how this is detected.
In each test, two people, one white and one minority, call and then visit an apartment complex or a real estate agent's office and inquire about a house or apartment that was just advertised recently. And they make the same requests, and they describe themselves as having the same income, the same assets, and the same employment. So from the perspective of the landlord or the real estate agent, they really are completely comparable customers. The only difference between them is their race or ethnicity. And if over hundreds of tests, we see that the whites are shown more units, told about more units, that's solid evidence of discrimination.
This is significant because blacks have less options on where to live affordably, which could result in them returning to poorer areas. In order to end housing discrimination, there needs to be legal policies enacted specifically for the benefit of the black community instead of universal housing policies for all individuals.